these two phones cost almost exactly the same money. The Realme P4 Pro starts at around $342, roughly 28,700 rupees. The vivo T5x starts at $340, about 28,600. $2 apart. And that is where the similarity ends. One brings an AMOLED screen, a Snapdragon chip and 80-watt charging. The other a bigger battery, tougher sealing, and a newer version of Android. Over the next few minutes, we'll go through them spec by spec and find out exactly where that identical price goes. The Realme P4 Pro. Realme's performance pick, built around a 144Hz AMOLED panel and Qualcomm's Snapdragon 7 Gen 4. And the vivo T5x, Vivo's endurance phone with a 7,200 milliamp-hour cell, IP68 and IP69 sealing, and Android 16 out of the box. Same money, very different priorities. This is the biggest gap in the whole comparison. The Realme P4 Pro uses a 6.8-inch AMOLED at 1280 by 2800, refreshing at 144 Hz with HDR10+ and Corning Gorilla Glass 7 E over the top. The vivo T5x runs a 6.76-inch IPS LCD at 1080 by 2344, refreshing at 120 Hz. So the Realme is sharper, faster, and using the better panel technology. Deeper blacks and far better contrast. Brightness is the headline. The Realme is rated 1800 nits in high brightness mode and peaks at 6500, while the Vivo is rated 1200 nits. Whichever figure you compare, the Realme is the screen you'll still be able to read in direct sunlight. The Realme P4 Pro takes the display chapter outright. AMOLED against LCD, 144Hz against 120, a sharper panel, and a brightness ceiling several times higher. If the screen is the part of a phone you look at all day, this one is already settled. Height first. The Realme P4 Pro stands 162.3mm tall, against 166.6 for the vivo T5x, 4.3mm shorter, about 2.5%. Small on paper, but it's the difference between a phone that sits in your hand and one your thumb has to reach across. Front on, the Realme P4 Pro measures 76.2mm against 78.4, 2.2mm narrower. Combine that with the shorter body and the slimmer 7.7mm profile against 8.4 on the Vivo, and the Realme is the easier phone to wrap a hand around and the easier one to pocket. Both phones use a plastic frame. The Realme P4 Pro lists Corning Gorilla Glass 7 I over its display. The vivo T5x's sheet doesn't name a glass. Sealing goes the other way, and clearly. The Vivo carries an IP68 and IP69 rating, so it's dust-tight, submersible, and rated for high-pressure water jets, against IP66 on the Realme, which covers powerful water jets but not being submerged. Then there's weight, 189 grams against 219. That's 30 grams, or 14%, in the Realme's favour, and it's the first thing you notice picking both of them up. The Realme P4 Pro is the more comfortable phone in every dimension that matters. Shorter, narrower, slimmer, and 30 grams lighter, which you feel within seconds of holding both. The vivo T5x spends that extra size on a slightly bigger battery and takes the ceiling win with its IP68 and IP69 rating against the Realme's IP66. Comfort to the Realme, ruggedness to the Vivo. Both lead with a 50-megapixel main camera, so on headline resolution this is a fair fight, though the Realme P4 Pro lists a brighter f1.8 lens with optical stabilization and adds an 8-megapixel ultrawide alongside it. An ultrawide isn't listed for the vivo T5x. Selfies favour the Realme 2, 50 megapixels against 32. Video is the clearest split. The Realme records 4K at 30 or 60 frames a second, and 1080p all the way up to 120 for slow motion, while the Vivo is listed at 4K 30 and 1080p 30. The Realme P4 Pro is the more complete camera on paper. The same 50-megapixel main resolution, but with a brighter, stabilized lens, a second ultra-wide camera, a sharper 50-megapixel selfie camera, and 60 frames per second 4K plus 120 frames per second slow motion. Neither is a flagship shooter, but on the spec sheet the Realme lists more ways to shoot. Capacity goes to the vivo T5x, but only just. 7,200 mAh against 7,000. That's a 200 mAh edge, about 3%. Both use silicon carbon cells, which is how phones this slim carry 7,000 plus batteries at all. Charging is where they separate. The Realme P4 Pro takes 80 watts wired and adds 10 watt reverse wired charging, so it can top up your earbuds. The vivo T5x charges at 44 watts, and Vivo quotes 50% in 43 minutes. That's nearly twice the charging power on the Realme, for a battery that's very nearly the same size. A split chapter, but not an even one. The vivo T5x holds about 3% more charge. The Realme P4 Pro puts it back nearly twice as fast, at 80 watts against 44. Over a year of daily charging, the watts matter more than the 200 mAh. The Realme P4 Pro runs Android 15 under Realme UI 6.0, with 3 major Android upgrades promised, on Qualcomm's Snapdragon 7 Gen 4, a 4nm chip with a 2.8 GHz prime core and Adreno 722 graphics. The vivo T5x ships newer software, Android 16 with OriginOS 6, on MediaTek's Dimensity 7400 Turbo, also 4nm, with 4 Cortex A78 cores at 2.6 GHz and Mali G615 graphics. Memory is the other split. The Realme offers 8 or 12 GB of RAM, the Vivo 6 or 8. The vivo T5x arrives on newer software, Android 16 out of the box against Android 15. But the Realme P4 Pro has the stronger hardware underneath, with the newer generation Snapdragon, better graphics, and up to 12 GB of RAM against 8. Software you can update, silicon you can't. Storage runs from 128 up to 512 GB on the Realme P4 Pro, and from 128 to 256 on the vivo T5x. So the Realme goes twice as far at the top end. Both use UFS 3.1, so read and write speeds are in the same class, and neither phone has a memory card slot. That makes the amount you buy on day one the amount you live with. Same storage technology and the same lack of expansion on both, but the Realme P4 Pro offers a 512 GB tier that isn't in the vivo T5x's lineup, and pairs it with more RAM. If you keep a lot on your phone, that ceiling decides it. On Geekbench 6, the Realme P4 Pro scores 3,533 multi-core and 1,214 single-core, against 2,966 and 1,087 for the vivo T5x. That's 19% more multi-core performance and 12% more single-core. The Snapdragon ahead both on all cores at once work and on the burst responsiveness you feel every time an app opens. AnTuTu tells the same story with a much wider margin. On version 10, the Realme P4 Pro scores 1,075,421 against 675,206, 59% higher. On the newer version 11, it's 1,454,430 against 942,419, a 54% lead. That isn't a half step, that's a full tier of chip. Graphics is where the gap is widest. In 3D Mark's Wildlife Extreme test, the Realme P4 Pro returns 1,795 against 1,017 for the vivo T5x, 76% more, very nearly double. If you play anything demanding, that's the difference between turning the settings down and leaving them up. The Realme P4 Pro sweeps the benchmark chapter, and the margin widens the harder you push. 19% on Geekbench multi-core, more than 50% on AnTuTu, and 76% in 3D Mark's graphics test. Both phones are fine for messaging and video. For gaming, this isn't close. The Realme P4 Pro carries a newer Wi-Fi, up to Wi-Fi 6, against Wi-Fi 5 on the vivo T5x. Both run Bluetooth 5.4, and the Realme's entry also lists the aptX HD and LHDC5 codecs for higher quality wireless audio. Both use a USB Type-C 2.0 port, and the Vivo's entry also lists OTG. For satellites, the Realme lists GPS, GLONASS, Galileo and Beidou, and the Vivo lists those 4 plus QZSS. Neither phone has NFC, so tap to pay is out on both, and the Realme adds an infrared blaster for controlling a TV or an air conditioner. The Realme P4 Pro takes this on the standard that matters most, Wi-Fi 6 against Wi-Fi 5, plus the extra Bluetooth audio codecs and an infrared blaster. The vivo T5x answers with an extra satellite system and an OTG listing. That neither phone has NFC is the real headline here. The basics are identical: accelerometer, gyroscope, proximity and compass, present on both. The difference is how you unlock them. The Realme P4 Pro uses an optical fingerprint reader under the display. The vivo T5x puts its reader on the side of the phone. Under display is the more modern approach and works with the phone flat on a table. Side-mounted falls under your thumb as you pick the phone up. Effectively a tie on the sensor suite, with the Realme P4 Pro ahead on the unlock method, an under-display reader against a side-mounted one. That's a preference more than a win. Now the part everyone's waiting for, the price. And it's the number that makes this whole comparison interesting. At 128GB, the Realme P4 Pro is about $342 roughly 28,700 rupees. The vivo T5x is $340, about 28,600, $2 apart. At 256GB, it's $383 against $381, again, near identical. And the Realme goes one step further with a 512GB tier at around $428, or 36,000 rupees. These are the base prices and are subject to change. You might get better deals, discounts and coupon codes, or installment plans when you actually decide to buy. This is the number that reframes everything else. These two phones cost the same money, within about $2 at every shared tier. So every advantage we've counted is one you get for free. On price against spec, it isn't a contest. The Realme P4 Pro is the stronger phone almost everywhere it's measured. An AMOLED panel against an LCD, 144 Hz against 120, a far higher brightness ceiling, 12 to 76% more performance depending on the test, 80-watt charging against 44, 30 grams lighter, and a 512GB tier the vivo T5x doesn't offer. The vivo T5x's answers are real but narrower, a slightly larger 7,200 milliamp-hour battery, an IP68 and IP69 rating against the Realme's IP66, and Android 16 with OriginOS 6 out of the box. Buy the Realme P4 Pro if you want the better screen, the faster chip and the quicker charging. At this price it is simply more phone. Buy the vivo T5x if tougher ceiling, the newest Android and the largest battery matter more to you than benchmark scores, and an LCD screen doesn't bother you. So which one would you pick? Let us know in the comments, and if this comparison helped, drop a like and subscribe for more.